You asked me to talk about the Supreme Court's decision yesterday for minors, transgender minors. I want to do a similar thing with that issue that I just did with Iran, and that's to back up a little bit. Because before you think about the issue of medical care or children or transgender Americans or any number of those sort of immediate issues, there is the issue that I wish we talked more about. And that's that rights are not a la carte. When I hear people saying, well, people shouldn't talk about trans rights or people shouldn't talk about those rights because people don't like those things, you don't get to pick and choose who has rights unless you're willing to admit the principle that some people have rights and other people do not have rights. And if you're willing to admit that principle, then it's only a question of time until you're one of the groups that does not have rights. So that decision yesterday stood on the same grounds that the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health decision stood, the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. And this is really important because what those two decisions do is they make a really important argument that has been part of American history since the 1830s. And that's that American democracy is served so long as people in a state pass a law. And that's what a true democracy should be, because at the state level, people are more involved in democracy. They pay more attention. And if that's what if that's what a state wants, if they want to get rid of abortion rights, for example, that's fine because they have voted for that. And the word for this is poisonous, because that is the reason that Americans developed that argument in the 1830s was because it was very clear that the vast majority of Americans did not support the institution of human enslavement. So what happened was those people in the states that wanted to preserve enslavement developed this argument that democracy really resided in the states. And so long as the states voted to first take indigenous Americans' lands in 1830 and promote human enslavement, that was a democratic outcome. But here's the kicker to that. The people who were in charge decided who got to vote. I promise you that if Black Americans had been able to vote in those states where they were enslaved, or if indigenous Americans had been able to vote over the fate of their lands, the outcome would have been extraordinarily different. And this is what we are seeing in this moment. The radical people who have taken over the Republican Party are limiting who gets to have a say in those states. And by limiting that, they are doing things like taking away the rights of trans children and their parents to make decisions with their doctors about that care, to take away rights to abortion, to take away all sorts of other rights that should be guaranteed under the Constitution to begin with, but also under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. So one of the things that the reasons I'm pointing that out is because you're seeing this in a really big way among the radical Republicans who are taking over the American government. They are trying to center things in the states where they can determine who gets to vote and where they can drown out the majority in order to push staunchly pro-business legislation like letting children work in factories. They're taking rights away from trans children. They're taking away abortion rights. They're taking away rights that they believe infringe on the Christian nation that they want to construct. So I guess I'm sort of suggesting that rather than focusing on simply saying this particular decision is an attack on a certain kind of rights, it's an attack on all of us. And protecting those rights and protecting the right to equality before the law for all Americans is not dividable. You can't a la carte it, like I say. Either all of us have rights or None of us have rights. And that's sort of the way that I'm thinking about that particular decision and how I'm intending to talk about those decisions because well, first of all, because that's how Lincoln talked about Black rights in a time when Black rights were really controversial. But also because I think it is right that either we all enjoy the same rights in this incredibly complicated, multicultural, multi-religious, sort of crazy quilt of a country, or we start to say we can divide who gets rights in this country and who doesn't.